Welcome to the show. I'm James Swanwick. Today we're talking to New York Times bestselling author of Atomic Habits, James Clear. I met James in Portland, Oregon some years ago at a conference, and I interviewed him about habits just before his book blew up, and it's now sold 5 million copies. The book is called Atomic Habits. He's one of the world's great leaders on habits. And today's podcast, as you saw in the title, is called How Tiny Habits Lead to Big Success. And as it relates to drinking, just a little change of either reducing, let's just say a little change of reducing drinking can lead to huge success, as James is going to explain here. Just a change in your habit and your morning routine can lead to huge success. Just a change in your evening routine can lead to huge success, and so forth and so forth. So really looking forward to sharing this conversation with now one of the world's top habits leaders, James Clear. Here we go.
Today we're talking about habits, the surprising power of small habits. How can tiny habits lead to big success? You may have a goal in mind and it just becomes completely overwhelming. So overwhelming that you don't even start. Or maybe you start at 100 miles an hour and then all of a sudden you just give up after a week or two. Have you created the right habits to lead to success? How do you create habits that will lead you to success? Well, we've got the king of habits right now. We've got James Clear, who writes about how to build habits that stick. He writes about the science of building good habits, of breaking bad ones, and mastering your mental and physical performance. He's a bit of a unit, like we say in Australia. He's built like a brick shit house. There's another one there. I met him in Portland at the World Domination Summit in July of 2013. Big unit, physical guy, healthy guy, and he's blowing up in the habit space. James Clear, great to have you here, mate.
Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's great to be on.
You're welcome. You can pay me $100 for that introduction that I just gave you, right? James, habits. Let's talk about it, okay? Because let me just give you an example of my day, all right? I've changed my morning habits and my morning routine a few times over the past 12 months. Last year, I would wake up in the morning and I would put my gym clothes at the foot of my bed and I'd get up at 6:30. I would see the gym clothes, I'd put them on and I would go to the gym and I would work out, and that was my habit. And then I'd come back and I'd have breakfast and I'd shower and then I'd start my day. Since then, I've changed it to I wake up at 6 these days, and I write in my gratitude diary, so I'm grateful, and I do a little bit of meditation, not much, 5 minutes, and then I go to work, and I punch out like 2.5 hours of work. It's what Brian Tracy calls kissing the frog. I get the main thing I want to get over and done with out of the way, and then I go to the gym about 8:50, 9 o'clock in the morning, and then I come back and have my breakfast and do all that. That's been working for me really well lately. So am I forming good habits, do you think, by that? I mean, based on what you know, is that a good habit? Is it okay to change your habits? Like, what constitutes a good habit and what constitutes a bad one?
Okay. So that's an interesting question. I think there are two questions there. So first, what you're doing is just fine. I think generally speaking, it's what works for certain people will not work for others. Like, it's going to be based on your circumstance and your goals. So there are some general rules, many of which we'll cover today. But there are no hard and fast rules where it says everyone has to do this. If you're looking for a good book as an indication of that, Daily Rituals, which was written by Mason Curie, it covers like 200 or 300 of the most famous scientists, artists, entrepreneurs, and their daily habits. And what's interesting about it is that there's no one universal thing. The only universal constant among all of these successful people was that they made time to do the work. And that, I would say, sort of leads into your second question, which is what constitutes a successful habit or what constitutes a good habit? I'd say the answer is a good habit is something that you can actually stick to, right? The only way to get these sustained results are to show up day after day, time after time. And if the pattern that you're following allows you to do that, then great. One thing I would say, which you sort of hinted at when you talked about the adjustment of your morning routine, I like to think about managing my energy rather than managing my time. We all have the same 24 hours in a day, and we often think that it's about time management. And time management is important. But if you have an hour free to do a particular activity, working out or writing, but you don't have the energy to do that task, then the time doesn't really matter. It's more about having the energy to perform the behaviors when you're trying to do them. So, I think it's just fine that you, for example, pushed your workout back in the day so that you could give those first 2 hours of the day to, kissing the frog and doing the hard work for your job. I have found that, just to give you an example of managing my energy, here's how I've stacked it. So when it comes to workouts, I've tried a variety of different spots. I tried early in the morning, like you did. I've tried working out around 11 a.m. I've tried doing like mid-afternoon or late afternoon. What I have found is that my best lifts tend to come when I work out between like 4 and 7 p.m. So that's when I work out. Meanwhile, my creative tasks, like my creative energy, when I started managing that, I realized that if I wrote in the afternoon, I would like half finish articles or, come up with 3 or 4 ideas, but I never would take a project to completion. Meanwhile, if I wrote in the morning, I was more likely to start an article and actually finish it and see it all the way through. So I do creative tasks in the morning. And then I stack habits or stack tasks that I need to do, but that aren't essential for my creative energy. I do all those in the afternoon. So answering emails, I usually start answering email after noon. I don't answer email before noon most days. Same thing with interviews. I stack all my interviews and phone calls in the afternoon because I don't have to be sharp creatively, even though I still need to be able to, do the work. So that's an example of how I've organized my day a little bit so that my creative energy is highest in the morning. So that's when I do those tasks. My physical energy is highest in mid-afternoon to early evening. So that's when I work out. Another example, I have been intermittent fasting for about 3 years now. And so I typically eat all of my meals between noon and say 8 p.m. So in the morning, I'm not spending it, 30 minutes making breakfast, cleaning up, eating. I can spend that time putting it toward, the creative task and using my energy there, and then focus on eating and doing the other stuff later.
Yeah, it's good to look at it as energy management, not time management. I must admit I've not thought of it that way before, but in actual fact, I'm probably already doing that in the sense that I identified that I could move a lot of my work along by focusing on work from between like 6:30 and 8:30 before I went to the gym. Because I noticed that when I went to the gym last year, the first thing in the day, by the time I get back at 8:15, shower, have some breakfast, I'm not really starting my day till 9 a.m. Now that may seem normal to a lot of people, like, oh yeah, start a work day at 9. But then things got in the way. People were emailing me, calls would come in, text messages, and I was prone to distractions. But from 6:30 until 8:30, there's not too many distractions. People aren't really calling you or WhatsApping or emailing you at that time. And I found that, focusing on what I needed to move along without those distractions has really been of great benefit to me.
So this is another really essential thing when it comes to building good habits, and something that's useful to think about is, and you'll see this also in that book I mentioned, Daily Rituals by Mason Curie, all those artists that were doing work, they either worked very early in the morning or they worked very late at night. And one of the reasons is because in order to do creative work or pour yourself into a task without distraction, you kind of need to be working when people aren't constantly knocking on your door or sending you text messages or calling you.
Right.
So yeah, I like that a lot. When can you block off some time for yourself that's uninterrupted? And there are a variety of things you can do to help that. So like, here are a couple things I do. When I'm writing, I don't have a phone in my office. I leave it in another room. So I have no text messages or phone calls coming in. I will sometimes use Willpower or Self-Control, which is those are 2 apps for Mac that can block websites. So you can block Twitter, Facebook, ESPN, whatever you take a look at all the time. So you can block off all the internet distractions. The other thing that I found useful is working in full screen mode. So when you work just with a normal desktop, you'll have different cues or triggers that prompt you. You'll see the icons for your web browser, for example, or for your email client or whatever it is. If you work in full screen mode, on a Mac, I can have separate desktops. So I'll like actually put it on a full separate desktop and do my writing over there. I don't see anything else. I don't see the clock. I don't see any, signals in the, my Wi-Fi reading. I don't see any triggers for other apps or anything like that. So it sounds small, but by adding all those little things together, no phone, no distracting websites, no visual cues with the icons, it all starts to add up to it's much easier to focus. So those are a variety of things you can try.
Yeah, that little, I think that the most evil invention ever is that little notification symbol from Facebook where it tells you that you've got like 8 likes or 8 people comments or whatever. Like that kills you. I mean,
you can't not click on it.
Yeah, you can't not click on it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But I tell you, I mean, it's like science have actually, it's like a little dopamine release like that. And Facebook are very clever because they figured that out. They figured that out that when you see that little icon that says 3, 4, 5 likes or messages, just a little bit of dopamine is released in your brain. It becomes like addictive and you want it and you want it more and you want it more. I mean, I know I've posted stuff on Facebook before and then 10 minutes later, I'm looking back going, has anyone liked it yet? What's going on?
Right. Yeah, I know. We're not immune to it, even if you understand it, which I think is an important reason to cut it out of the environment because you're still a victim of it, even if you know why it works.
Right.
One of the things that I've done with my phone, for example, all of these are little things to try to take back control of my life. So with your phone, if you have push notifications on, you get bombarded with stuff all the time. So I turned all push notifications off for all apps. I get nothing on there. I also, for a month, I uninstalled all social media apps and all email apps on my phone. And it was just for a month to see if I really would miss it or whatever. And it was great. I mean, and so what I ended up doing when I put them back on, I don't have my phone with me right now, but on the home screen, the only icons on there are phone and text messages and notes if I have to jot something down. So there's nothing on the home screen. Everything else is on a separate screen, the second screen over. And in that second screen, there are separate folders where I have like social and then all the social apps are in there. So in order to get to say Instagram, rather than just opening my phone and clicking on it right away because it's right there on the home screen, I have to slide to the second screen, open up a separate folder, and then click on it. And the goal is just to make it a little more intentional. I'm fine with going there if I actually want to do it. But if I'm just wasting time because it happens to be on the home screen of my phone, that's not a good use of time.
Yeah, right. I actually did something similar. Not as much as you did, but I'm going to show you just here on the screen. If you're listening on the podcast, you won't be able to see this. But if you're watching on the video, you will be. But here's my home screen, James. So maybe you can tell me how I can fix this. I've got 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 21, 22, 23. I've got 25 little icons on my home screen here, okay? What I did do is I moved the social media one onto the third screen.
Yeah.
Got it there as social, and then I have to click there, and I've got Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So that's good, and that's prevented me from seeing the Facebook icon light up. Now, I do work in an environment with colleagues a lot of the time where it's important that we go back and forth. And my colleagues love to use WhatsApp, and I begrudgingly have to concede that it actually is a good way to interact with colleagues on a real-time basis. So I've got my WhatsApp icon here. I've got 7. I'm already freaking out. I've got 7 WhatsApp messages. Oh, my God. I've got 1 text message here. So what about where people do have to have interaction with colleagues or family members or whatever on an ongoing basis? How does that work? Because for you, you're a solo entrepreneur, obviously. You don't have colleagues or things like that. Like, how does it work for people who need that kind of interaction throughout a normal day?
Well, so I think the first thing to realize is that having some of this interaction is not bad. What we're trying to do is cut out the wasteful pieces of interaction, right? So that you can put your energy toward the pieces that work. So like for my team, for example, when I communicate with my employees, we often do it through Slack or through Evernote. So, but that's just what those channels are for, is just communication with them. So they aren't being muddied. The water isn't being muddied with other communication. Like if we tried to communicate via text message, that'd be fine. But, we could communicate, but then I'd also be getting stuff from my mom, my dad, my friends, and, there'd be a lot of things distracting me within that channel. So the first idea is, how can you create a dedicated channel just for the things that matter so that you're only getting signal there and not noise? And then the second piece is, how can we cut out the wasteful uses of time? So for example, I mentioned Instagram earlier. If you open Instagram and go on it, or Facebook and go on it, and you're just browsing 20 times a day for 2 or 3 minutes, that isn't useful, a useful allocation of time. It's fine to go on and just spend 20 minutes on Facebook if that's what you want to do to decompress, but do it when you want to, not just because it's in front of you.
Right.
So that's kind of, I think, the main message.
So I have a product called the 30-day no alcohol challenge, which inspires people to take 30 days off alcohol and lose weight, get better clarity, their skin improves, they just all around feel a lot healthier. And I've created a closed Facebook group for people who are paying customers of that. And what I've noticed is that there's such amazing interaction in that group. And it's so inspiring for me because people are doing it and they're losing weight and now they're sharing stories and they're posting photos and look at me, look how much weight I've lost. And this is the new suit I bought. And they're posting like inspirational images. And I love to go in there, like that dopamine release we talked about. I love to go in there and see the positive effects of something that I have created. However, I have noticed that I've been going in there a lot throughout the day, and it does distract me from other things. So what would your advice to me be so I can go into that group on a daily basis and interact with the other people and feel good about the fact that other people are interacting, but not have it be so, overbearing, if you like, that it distracts me from other things in my day?
Yeah. I don't know. That's a tough one because that helps provide meaning to your work too. So like it's a little bit deeper than just like, oh, I'm falling victim to a social media, ploy or whatever. So I would say there are two things that came to mind, and you can experiment with a variety of different things and see what works for you. But the first thing that you could do, I do this with my email. So I get a lot of email, and so my executive assistant processes some of it, and we set up a separate folder for me. And I created a hotkey or a keyboard shortcut in Google Chrome that goes directly to the folder for me, not to my inbox. So when I go into Gmail, I am only seeing the things in my folder because I just type that keyboard shortcut and go straight there. You could probably do that on Facebook as well. So create a keyboard shortcut for the URL link to your group rather than to the Facebook news feed. So you go straight to the group when you enter the shortcut in, rather than going to the Facebook news feed. So there's less likelihood that you get pulled into other stuff on Facebook and you're just seeing what you want to see.
Right.
Because there is value in going to the group and providing, feedback to them and seeing that for yourself. So that's one option. A more extreme option could be, have your assistant go through the group and then give you a summary either each day or each week. You meet on Tuesdays and Fridays, for example, or something like that. He or she alerts you of the most pressing messages of the biggest success stories. And then you can like type out your responses there, or they can give you a link directly to that post and you can just respond to those individually.
I like that.
Basically trying to, separate yourself from the checking it all the time.
Yeah, that's good. And would another way be I set aside a set 10 or 15 minutes every day at the same time to go in there and look at the group and respond, and then just have the self-discipline not to look at it again until the following day?
If that works for you, then yeah, absolutely. That would be totally good. What I find is that for a lot of people, the self-discipline kind of fades away after a day or two. And it's really hard to stick to that because you're already in the habit of checking Facebook. One way to force your hand on that issue would be to install Freedom. I think it's just freedom.to or Self-Control, I think is the other app. I use Freedom for the most part. But you can actually block you can block Facebook for, say, from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. or something like that. Or you could block it from 6 a.m. to noon, and then it's open from noon to 1, and then blocked again from like 1 until 10 p.m. So you only give yourself like a 1 hour window where you can check it. You can't check it all day. You only give yourself a certain period of time where you can log in, check it, update it, and then move on.
You know what I found worked the absolute best for me, James?
What's that?
Is when I gave a former assistant my former assistant had the password. So in actual fact, I couldn't log in. The only person who could log in was my assistant. And the only way that I could get into my Facebook was to say to my assistant, what's the login? Does that make sense? So that worked for me because I couldn't get in. Like I just physically could not access my account without having to speak to my assistant and have my assistant tell me what the password was. And that was like a breath of fresh air. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. There's a guy called, I'm going to butcher it now. He was actually the guy that created the thumbs up, the like button on Facebook. And now he created Asana. What's his name?
Dustin Moskovitz?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It wasn't Dustin, but he created. Let me see, Asana, Facebook. I met him in. Met him in San Francisco on Justin Rose. Was it? Maybe it was Dustin. No, I think it was Justin Rosenstein. That was who it was. Justin Rosenstein. It wasn't Dustin Moskovitz. It was Justin. Maybe it was Dustin. Oh, man, I'm butchering this now. But anyway, I got a photo of me and him doing the Facebook thumbs up. But my mate Manish Sethi, who we both know, he's the creator of the company Pavlok, of which I am an investor, an angel investor in. And he introduced me to him. And it's funny, he was one of the original Facebook co-founders, then went on to create Asana. And he actually told me and Manish at this party we were at in July of 2013, I give my assistant my Facebook password so I can't go in. And she gives it to me every Friday at 5:00. And then I go in for an hour and then I don't look at it for the rest of the week. And the irony was just extraordinary, It's
the
like
person who created this drug that they couldn't get off of.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I wish I knew which one it was, whether it was Dustin. I should just Google the name and look at the photo. Right there we go. That'll solve the dilemma.
Mystery.
The mystery.
Well, I don't know. It's interesting. I think to wrap up this thought on tiny changes and why they lead to.
It was Justin Rosenstein. There you go. Yeah, Justin Rosenstein. Yeah,
the mystery has been solved. I'll just tell a brief story that I think indicates why these tiny changes that we've been talking about lead to something significant. So in the mid-2000s, Great Britain's professional cycling team, Team Sky, hired a man named Dave Brailsford, and he was their team performance director. At the time, Team Sky had a pretty middle-of-the-road record when it came to international cycling. They had never won a Tour de France. They were just sort of middle of the pack. And so they asked Brailsford, what's your plan for overcoming this? And he believed in the strategy they called the aggregation of marginal gains. And the way that he described it was the 1% improvement in nearly everything that you do. And so they started by looking at a bunch of things that you would expect a cycling team to do. Like they got slightly lighter tires for the bike. They built a more ergonomic seat. They had their riders wear biofeedback sensors so they could see how they were responding to training. They had their outdoor riders wear indoor racing suits because they were slightly lighter and more aerodynamic. But then they did a bunch of stuff that you wouldn't expect a cycling team to do. They taught their riders how to wash their hands to reduce the risk of infection and keep them healthier. They figured out the type of pillow that led to the best night's sleep for each rider and then brought it on the road with them to hotels. They split tested different massage gels to see which one led to the best muscle recovery. And anyway, Brailsford thought, if we can execute on this strategy, if we can actually do all these little 1% changes, I think we can win the Tour de France within 5 years. He ended up being wrong. They won the Tour de France in 3 years. And then they repeated again in the 4th year with a different rider. And then when he coached the British cycling team at the Olympics in London in 2012, they won 70% of the gold medals available. And so that idea that like these 1% changes actually, they don't just add up to a little bit of success, they add up to very significant success if done consistently. That I think is why I believe in the power of habits so much and why committing to understanding the science of habit formation is so important, because it doesn't require you to do some massive leap in performance. It just requires you to make small improvements each day. And those can lead to something very significant.
Yeah, that's a great story, James. Thank you for sharing that. I might just give you my own version of that story, or another analogy, just before we wrap this up. By the way, we're talking to James Clear here, who is the king of habits and understands the science of habits. You can check out James's website at jamesclear.com. So I often use this analogy, James, and it's this. Los Angeles to Sydney. Los Angeles, California to Sydney, Australia. If you set off on a sailboat and you have a direct path, what's going to happen if you set off just half a degree to the left or half a degree to the right? Let's say half a degree to the left. By the time that you arrive, you're not actually going to arrive. By the time it should take to get on a direct path from LA to Sydney, where are you going to end up? You're going to end up thousands of miles away from Sydney. You're not going to reach your destination because you started off just a half a degree to the left. You might end up like way to the other side of of New Zealand. So,
and think about how many choices we make like that on a daily basis, right? They're like a half degree better or a half degree worse. And it's like, how do those things add up?
I'm actually going to show it. If you're watching on the video rather than the podcast, I'm actually got a map of the world behind me here. So I'm gonna you can see this, James, right?
Yeah.
So here's actually Los Angeles is not on this map, which is a pain, but it's it is rather. It's just not on this side of the map. Sorry about that. So simple thing here, but let's use the example of say Perth to India. Let's say you're going from Chennai in India and you're trying to reach Perth in Australia. So if you do it directly, bang, you'll make it there, right? But if you're just a half a millimeter off, look at this. Look where you end up. You end up somewhere deep in the Indian Ocean. So again, same analogy. It's even if, and again, another thing, if you're on the wrong path, all you got to do is change it 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters, and all of a sudden you get back in the direction and you can make it to Perth. Okay. So it's just very, very, very little things. Yep. Incremental changes, tiny little things. I've even been experimenting this week with the way I make my breakfast in the morning. Like I realized my whole breakfast routine was taking 30 minutes, and I was like, bugger this for a joke. I'm going to try and get this down to 10 minutes. And so rather than me coming back from the gym and, putting my kale and spinach in a pan to try and get rid of the oxalic acid and then putting it in a blender and then getting some almond milk and some nuts and putting it in and then after that, drinking that and then making some eggs. Now I actually I have pre-made meals ready to go on some cases. And then I figured out, here's the other thing, rather than me going shopping for the damn food and like after I finish at the Crunch Gym on Sunset Plaza, after my workout, sometimes I'll go into the Trader Joe's and I'll go shopping for 15 minutes and then walk home. And I said, bugger that for a joke. I'm going to have my in-person assistant go and do my shopping for me now. And that saves me 15 minutes a couple times a week. Or if you can't afford an assistant or you don't have an assistant or whatever reason, get your food delivered. Or get pre-made meals as long as it's healthy. You don't get processed crap, obviously. You want fresh fruits and vegetables. But again, these are ways you can cut down on your time, which gives you more time to think, to focus on the things that you want to do. And again, that's not a huge change. It's 15 minutes a couple times a week of shopping. That's still 30 minutes a week. That's still 2 hours a month. Mm-hmm. That's still a full day, 24 hours in a year. Like what can you do with it, with all of that extra time? Imagine what you can do. It's so little changes, as James is saying there. Does that sound about right, James?
Yeah. I think tiny gains add up to something very significant over time.
And I don't want to be, whoever's listening to this, you might be saying, I can't afford an assistant or I can't do this. And, I don't want to be coming off as like, I don't want you to be thinking, well, I can't do that because I'm not at that level. If you're obviously not at that level, but just think of what you can do. Is there something else that you can do to improve your morning routine, your daily routine, to remove distractions? Just think, force yourself to think. And when you do that, the way will appear. Right, James?
Sounds great.
All right, jamesclear.com. Check him out there. James, this has been enlightening. Thank you so much for sharing that. You've done a lot of work on this, haven't you? You've read books and done science and tested it. And how many little tests of your own do you think you've done to be able to be in a position of speaking about this with authority?
Oh yeah, hundreds. There's been a lot of work that's gone into it, thousands of hours for sure. I will leave with one thing. We've covered a lot of ground about habits and behavior change in this interview. If you're looking for more, I've summarized a lot of my best ideas on habits and behavior change in a PDF guide. It's 45 pages. It's called Transform Your Habits. If you want to download it, it's totally free. It's at jamesclear.com/habits.
There you go, jamesclear.com/habits. Make sure you check it out. And when you're communicating with James, make sure you let him know that you heard him on the James Swanwick Show podcast or here on the video. So, James, thank you very much, mate. I appreciate your time.
You bet. Thank you.
And thank you very much to you, the listener and the viewer. And I will catch you on the next one.